Hello, good day everyone. So today we will be talking about another lesson. Because of the unstable internet connection, we opt to have this recorded discussion. So we will be talking about another subtopic of the social, economic, political, and cultural issues in the Philippine history. So, the evolution of the Philippine Constitution as well as the policies on agrarian reform is just under the topic that I've said. We have to discuss, understand, and review about these lessons so that we will be able to understand the current situation of our country. So we will be able to understand the life that we are living in the present society. So in the light of history, we will be able to understand what have happened in the past that could have shaped the life that we are living today. So, without any further ado, let us start our discussion. So, this could have been our activity before we will start our formal discussion. No? So, I have here a wheel of questions, and I also have your wheel of names. So, it could have been fun if we have done this virtually, no? Kay thrilling. So the first question would be, what might happen if the government stops collecting taxes? So reflect upon the question and think, but what could really happen if the government stops collecting taxes? So next question would be, what's this? So, a government mechanism which is used to raise funds or revenues. So, the answer for this is taxation. So, I hope that you will comprehend or understand those terms because it will be related on the topic that we will be having today. So, next question. So, it is an amount of money levied on the citizens that is collected by the government or an authority. So, the answer for this would be tax. And the last question. I am sorry for my voice, no, I have colds. So, for the last question, we have the importance of tax collection. So, later on, we will be talking about the importance of tax collection. So, that could have been our activity before starting our discussion, no? So, this was supposed to be your wheel of names. So, it could have been fun if we have done this virtually. So, DC could have answered the first question. So, yeah, because of the unstable internet connection, let us just have this recorded discussion. With our previous activity, I hope that you have already thought about our lesson for today, which is all about the evolution of Philippine taxation. So before anything else, let us read first our learning objectives for today. So at the end of the lesson, 90% of the students are, let us read first our learning objectives for today. So at the end of the lesson, 90% of the students are expected to A. Identify the different reform and policies on taxation across the years. B. Create a timeline of the evolution of taxation in the Philippines. And C. Explain the importance of implementing policies on taxation for the economy and government of our country. So although we don't share the same screen, we are not on the same screen today, I hope that we can still achieve these learning objectives at the end of the lesson. So, I have here first two questions to ponder. So, think about your answers about this question so that you will be able to comprehend about the topic that we will be talking later on. So first, as a student, do you know ways as to how you can contribute to the taxation of the Philippines? And second, do you know where do these taxes paid by the citizens go? So I hope that you have listened in your Araling Panlipunan as well as the social studies related subjects on your on your senior high school years, no? So that you will be able to answer these questions. If you don't have any answer about this, I hope that after this discussion, you will be able to answer these questions. So first, let us define first what is taxation. So taxation is a government mechanism to raise funds. So it is a reality that all citizens must contend with for the primary reason that governments raise revenue from the people they govern to be able to function fully. So in exchange for the taxes that people pay, the government promises to improve the citizens' lives through a good governance. So, through the taxes or through tax collection, the government will be able to implement or provide projects that will improve the lives of the citizens here in our country. So, as the question in our previous activity, no? So, a tax. So, tax, these are the amount levied on the people or a firm uh, that will be collected by the government or an authority to raise revenue or funds for government projects like that will improve the lives of the people. So taxation is the mechanism, tax is the amount levied on the people. So to understand further about taxation, so we have here four major types of taxes. So actually for some sources, there are 12 types of taxes. So let us just tackle the most common among these types of taxes. So first is the income taxes. So these are taxes that are imposed on the income earned by a person or a firm. So it could be personal or company income tax. So it will depend upon the income of a person or a firm or a corporation. So the percent of the tax will depend upon the income. No, so the higher the income, the higher will be the tax. I'm sorry. So second is the property taxes. So these are imposed on assets. So local governments generally impose a property tax on business and personal properties. So next is the sales tax. So these are imposed on the value of goods sold. So taxes imposed as a percentage of firms' sales and are generally imposed on retail sales. So this could also be called value-added tax, and we will be talking about that later. So fourth is the excise taxes. So these are taxes which are imposed on specific goods or services. So excise tax is only levied on some specific items. So sometimes excise taxes are justified as a way of discouraging the consumption of demerit goods. So when we say demerit goods, so these are products that could be bad for the health of the citizen. So an example for this is alcohol and cigarette. So the tax that are imposed upon these products are called excise taxes. So next, to further understand about the evolution of the Philippine taxation, let us talk first about the taxation in the Spanish Philippines. So the payment of tribute or taxes, buwis, or handog, or the obligation to provide labor services to the datus in some early Filipino communities in the Philippines may resemble taxation. So these may resemble taxation in the pre-colonial Philippines, but this is much different, no, from the contemporary concept of taxation. So uh, before, so the Philippines may have abundant resources. So before we were colonized, so the Philippines have abundant resources, but um, our ancestors were mainly involved in a subsistence economy. So when we say subsistence economy, our ancestors only produced goods that are enough for their consumption. So they only produced agricultural products for their own consumption. But when the Spaniards arrived, so the Spaniards altered the subsistence system and imposed the payment of tributo or tributes from the Filipinos. So tributo could be agricultural products. So similar to what have been practiced in the colonies of America. So the purpose of the tributes or tributo is to generate resources to finance the maintenance of the islands, such as salaries of government officials and expenses of the clergy. So exempted from the payment of tributos were the principales or the government officials, so namely alcaldes or the governors, gobernadores or the mayors or the town mayors in the present society, cabezas de barangay, so these are the barangay captains, and soldiers, members of the civil guards, government officials, other government officials, and vagrants. So vagrants, so this could also be associated with beggars, no? These are people without permanent address, um, without income. So yeah, vagrants or beggars. Diba, for our previous discussion, we have talked about how scattered were our ancestors, no? So the Spaniards implemented this system of pueblo agriculture, diba? So the Filipinos were gathered on a certain area and were given lands to cultivate. So these certain areas were called pueblos or villages. And sooner this pueblo system developed into encomienda system. The Spanish crown awarded tracts of land to the encomenderos. So these encomenderos, so they're called encomenderos because they are the ones to manage the encomiendas. That's what we have tackled, diba, last time. So the collection of tributes or tributo was still not enough to fund the Spanish government, and because of this, they needed a subsidy from the Spanish crown, which is called situado real or royal situado. So it was a subsidy from Spain. So it is delivered from Mexican treasury to the Philippines through the galleons and stopped when Mexico became independent on 1820. So toward the end of the 16th century, the Manila-Acapulco galleon trade. So Acapulco, this is a city in Mexico, or the Mexico was called New Spain during the 16th century, no? So galleon, so these are large ships, no, which are made out of wood, as what you can see in the movies. So these are galleons. So it was called Manila Acapulco galleon trade, which was established through the galleons. So a way by which the Spaniards could make sure that European presence would be sustained. So for this galleon trade, so once a year, a galleon from Mexico would travel here in Asia to collect products, agricultural products, porcelain, textiles, and other products here in Asia, particularly here in Southeast Asia. So that galleon will collect these products and will deliver it to Mexico. So this have improved the economy of the Philippines during those times. So the payment of tribute was stopped on 1884 and was replaced by a poll tax collected through a certificate of identification called the cedula personal. So this cedula personal must be carried while traveling. So unlike tribute, cedula is by person and not by family. So it have added another burden of the peasants, no? So we also have two forms of taxes. So the direct tax and the indirect tax. So when we say direct tax, so this is imposed upon a person or a property directly. When we say indirect tax, so this tax is imposed upon a transaction. So not, of course, not directly to the person. That's why it's called indirect. So in 1878, the Spanish government implemented these taxes to increase or to add revenue for the government. So first is the urbana. So this is a tax on annual rental value of an urban real estate. So if you have a property or a real estate in an urban area, so you will be paying urbana. So second is industria. So this is a tax on salaries, dividends, and profits. So this will depend upon a person or upon a company depending on the salary, dividends, or share or profits of each person or company. So indirect taxes, as what I have said earlier, so these are taxes imposed on transactions such as customs duties were imposed on exports and imports to further raise revenue. So there are taxes imposed on imported and exported products to increase revenue of the government. So let us proceed. So the colonial government also gained income from monopolies. So when we say monopoly, there will only be one corporation or entity that will produce a certain product. So the prominent product that was under monopoly during those times was tobacco. So forced labor was also a character of Spanish colonial taxation in the Philippines and was required from the Filipinos. So if you can't afford to pay for your taxes, so you will pay it through services. So this was called pulo system. So male Filipinos were obliged to serve. So a burden that resulted in an increase in death rate and flight to the mountains because the Guardia Civil during those times were harsh and abusive not towards the Filipinos. That's why it increased the death rate and the flight to the mountains. So this changed later on as pulos and servicios became lighter and was organized at the municipal level. So males were required to provide labor for 40 days a year, which was reduced to 15 days in 1884. So that's when the pulos and servicios became lighter in 1884. So they may opt out by paying the falias of 3 pesos per annum. So if you don't want to provide your labor or your service, you could pay it through falias. So 3 pesos every year, which was lost to corruption because it was collected at the municipal level and were known as kaidas or droppings. So kaidas and droppings today. So these are the funds that are put on the bulsa, on the pockets of some corrupt government officials. So corruption was already prevalent and present, no, during colonial Philippines, and until now it hasn't stopped, and that's very sad. So the polos was called prestasyon personal or personal services by the second half of the 19th century. So let's proceed to the taxation under the Americans. So after we were colonized by the Spaniards, our sovereignty was surrendered to the next colonizers, which were the Americans. So from 1898 to 1903, the Americans followed the Spanish system of taxation with some modifications. So later on, the urbana would be replaced by tax on real estate, which became known as the land tax. So the land tax was levied on both urban and rural real estates. So there were problems with land tax, no? So the problems with land tax is that land titling in the rural areas was very disorderly. So appraising of land value was influenced by political and familial factors. The introduction of taxation system on agricultural lands faced objections from the landed elites who were sitting in the Congress, no? And because of these circumstances, the government established the Internal Revenue Law of 1904. So it was passed as a reaction to the problems of collecting land tax. So it prescribed 10 major sources of revenue. So these are the sources. So first, license tax on firms dealing in alcoholic beverages and tobacco, so the demerit products, no? So excise taxes on alcoholic beverages and tobacco products, taxes on banks and bankers, document stamp taxes. So if you will check documents, say for example letters, years ago there were stamps, document stamps. So you will pay for it, man. And next is the cedula. Sixth is taxes on insurance and insurance companies. Seventh is taxes on forest products. So these are lumbers. So next is mining concessions. 9 is taxes on business and manufacturing. And lastly, occupational licenses. So these were the sources for revenues during those times. So let us proceed. So in 1913, the Underwood-Simons Tariff Act was passed, resulting in a reduction in the revenue of the government as export taxes levied on sugar, tobacco, hemp, and copra were lifted. So it reduced the revenue of the government because the export taxes for those products, so these products, was lifted. So there were lesser exports during those times. So it is called Underwood-Simons Tariff Act because it was drafted by Oscar Underwood and Senate Finance Committee Chair Fornifold Simons introduced the approved compromise surtax charge. So these were the taxes that were levied on sugar, tobacco, hemp, and copra, which were lifted or increased. So it reduced the revenue of the government. So to make up for the loss, then Governor General Francis Burton Harrison urged that tax receipts be increased. So there were minor changes for the 1904 Internal Revenue Act, such as the imposition of taxes on mines, petroleum products, and dealers of petroleum products and tobacco. In 1914, an income tax was introduced. In 1919, an inheritance tax was created. So inheritance tax, so this was the tax levied on the properties that were inherited from generation to generation. So, and in 1932, a national lottery was established to create more revenue for the government. So today, this is the PCSO, or the Philippine Charity Sweepstakes Office, so which is responsible, no, for the lotto. So yeah, this was established on 1914, but lottery pa, but it developed into PCSO sooner. So after we got our independence from the America, so we have the Commonwealth period. So taxation during the Commonwealth period. So income tax rates were increased in 1936, adding a surtax rate on individual net incomes in excess of 10,000 pesos. So when your income will exceed 10,000 pesos, so another surtax rate will be added on your tax. So income tax rates of corporation were also increased. So in 1937, the cedula tax was abolished, which appeared to be a progressive move, but in 1940, a residence tax was imposed on every citizen aged 18 years old and on every corporation. So under the Spanish colonization law, I have mentioned the cedula personal. So I forgot to say that Chinese merchants who went here in the Philippines to have the barter system, no, together with the Filipinos. So the Chinese living here in the Philippines during those times were also collected, or were also made to pay their discriminatory cedula, which is bigger than what the Filipinos paid. So that's under the Spanish colonization. So under the Commonwealth period, so the cedula tax was abolished, but it was replaced with the residence tax on 1940. So let us proceed. So in 1939, the Commonwealth government drafted the National Internal Revenue Code, which introduced a tax structure that was an improvement of the earlier system introduced by the Americans, but still remained inequitable. So the lower class of the society were added burden, no, as this taxation changed all throughout time. So as World War II reached the Philippine shores, economic activity was put to a stop and the Philippines bowed to a new set of administrators, which are the Japanese. But the Japanese only colonized the Philippines for 3 years, no, and in some areas lang, not the entire Philippines, but some areas. But still, it affected the economy of our country. So let us proceed. Let us now discuss on the fiscal policy from 1946 to present. So when we say fiscal, this talks about the money which is collected by a certain government. So still about taxation. So by 1949, there was a severe lack of funds in many aspects of governance, such as the military and education sectors, because of the previous World War that had happened, no? So United States advised the adoption of direct taxation, but the administration of President Manuel Rojas declined the proposal because he did not want to alienate its allies in Congress. So he didn't want that his allies would feel left out, no, if he will apply or if he will adopt this direct taxation. So he needed to consult the Congress, but it will take years to implement or to adopt direct taxation. So he declined the proposal. So the impetus for economic growth came during the time of President Elpidio Quirino through the implementation of import and exchange controls that led to import substitution development. So let us proceed. So, by the virtue of Republic Act number 2211, a tax commission was created in 1859 by the succeeding presidencies of Magsaysay, Garcia, and Macapagal. So, a commission to study the tax structure and policy of the country to make way for a more robust and efficient tax collection scheme. Post-war fiscal policy remained still regressive, characterized by overburdening of the lowest classes, while the landed elite who held business interests were in Congress to ensure that taxes would not be levied to them who belonged to the higher classes of the society. So from time to time, they have made ways or made laws that will protect or that will ensure that taxes would not be levied to them. So that's how they have used their power. So from 1959 to 1968, Congress did not pass any tax legislation despite important changes in the economy and vested interests of Filipino businessmen in Congress and would manifest in any instances such as the rejection taxes on imports because they wanted to protect their personal gain. So that's how they abused their power. So let us proceed. So under the Marcos authoritarian regime, the tax system remained regressive. During the latter part of the Marcos years, from 1981 to 1985, the tax system was still heavily dependent on indirect taxes, which made up 70% of total tax collection. So still dependent on the import and export rates, no? Still indirect taxes. So, President Corazon Aquino reformed the tax system through the 1986 Tax Reform Program. So, the aim was to improve the responsiveness of the tax system, promote equality by ensuring that similarly situated individuals and firms bear the same tax burden. So, tax rates will depend upon the income of individuals and firms. Promote growth by withdrawing or modifying taxes that reduce incentives to work or produce, and improve tax administration by simplifying the tax system and promoting tax compliance. So a major reform in the tax system was also introduced under the term of President Aquino, which was the introduction of the value-added tax or the sales tax or VAT. So it was signed in 1986 and was put to effect on 1988. In other countries, this is called Goods and Service Tax or GST. So it is levied on the price of product or services at each stage of production, distribution, or sale to the end consumer. So value-added tax, so this is levied mostly on consumer products, so the different products that we consume. So that's how value-added tax works. So let us proceed. So along with tax reform came the administrative reform, so such as the restructuring of the Department of Finance and its attached agency, the Bureau of Internal Revenue or BIR, through the Executive Order 127. So these agencies are responsible for the checking of the taxes of the people, especially those individuals who have high income. So, greater political stability during the administration of Fidel V. Ramos in 1992 allowed for continued economic growth. So in 1997, the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program was implemented to first make the tax system broad-based, simple, and with reasonable tax rates. Second, minimize tax avoidance allowed by existing laws and loopholes in the system. Third is encourage payments by increasing tax exemption levels and lowering the highest tax rates and simplifying procedure. And lastly, rationalize the grant of tax incentives, which was estimated to be worth 531.7 billion pesos in 1994. Let us proceed. So the value-added tax base was also broadened in 1997 to include services through Republic Act number 7716. So this time, services was also included, not only products. So that's when the VAT broadened. So President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, who took over the position of President Joseph Estrada. So President Joseph Estrada has resigned for his position as the president, though, because an impeachment was supposed to be done because he corrupted the funds of the Kaban ng Bayan. So that's why President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo took over his position. So Gloria Macapagal Arroyo increased government spending without adjusting tax collections, which resulted in large deficits from 2002 to 2004. So we faced deficits during those times because of the increased government spending of GMA. So in 2005, the expanded value-added tax or EVAT was signed into law as Republic Act number 9336. So in February 2006, the VAT tax rate was also increased from 10% to 12%. So as President Benigno Aquino III succeeded President Arroyo in 2010, he promised that no fee taxes would be imposed and additional revenue would have to come from adjusting existing taxes. So sin tax reform was implemented, which ventured the adjustment of excise tax on liquor and cigarettes. So Republic Act number 10351 was passed, and government revenues from alcohol and tobacco excise tax increased. So another addition for the excise tax for the demerit products. So let us proceed. So the administration of President Rodrigo Duterte promised tax reform, particularly in income taxes, as it vowed to lower income tax rates shouldered by working Filipinos. So the present income tax scheme of the country is the second highest in Southeast Asia. So the proposed tax reform also seeks to limit VAT exemptions and increase excise tax on petroleum products and automobiles. So the Philippine tax law has undergone several reforms, the most recent of which is the Republic Act number 10963, or the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion, or the Train Law, that took effect in 2018. So with this law, so it has provided funds for the build projects of the administration of PRD, and also in the train law, another excise tax was added to the demerit products like alcohol and tobacco, so as well as beverages that contain sugar, no? Such as juice, sodas, soft drinks, so anything that contains sugar. An excise tax was also added, so that's because of the train law. So let us proceed. Those are the evolution of the Philippine taxation. So I hope that with the information given, we have understood the current taxation in the Philippines. So let us also talk about the importance of tax collection. So why do we need to collect taxes? So for what are these taxes? So the importance of tax collection. So government relies heavily on tax revenue to fund its operations and finance its development projects. So it could also help promote economic stability and growth. because tax collection will provide funds for operations and finance development projects. So this will promote economic stability and growth. Next, by imposing taxes on certain goods and services, the government can discourage their unnecessary consumption and produce and ensure that resources are used more efficiently. So it could help protect the health of the people, no? Like the excise tax on demerit products. So it will discourage the citizens to buy alcoholic beverages or cigarettes, which could only be bad for the health. So lastly, redistribute income and wealth in the society. So an example for this is the 4Ps or the Pantawid Pamilyang Filipino program. So it could help redistribute the income and wealth to the society by giving subsidy to the poorest of the poor, which will help them live, and which will help them buy their needs. So that's how tax collection will help redistribute income and wealth in the society. So it is hoped that reforms in the country's tax policy will result in the much desired economic development that will be felt even by the lowest classes in the society. So with tax collection, it is hoped that there will be more economic development programs that will help the poorest of the poor improve their way of living. So I guess that's everything that's need to be discussed. So I hope that you have understood what we have tackled today, and I hope that you learn something. No, not something, but I hope you learn from it. So for your assessment or your activity, so create a timeline of the evolution of the taxation in the Philippines. So include important details such as dates, laws, reforms, and policies implemented, as well as prominent persons involved in the reforms or policies that have been implemented and the like in your timeline. So criteria, content 10 points, accuracy 5 points, for a total of 15 points. So for your assignment, study for a long quiz on May 18, 2002, and the coverage would be social, political, economic, and cultural issues in the Philippine history, which were the lessons that we had on the previous weeks. So evolution of the Philippine Constitution, policies on agrarian reform, and evolution of Philippine taxation. So that's all for today, and thank you, class. Have a great day ahead. Bye!